We have this paper out of Stanford where these researchers claim to have trained a reasoning model for $50 in cloud credits. That's making the rounds.
Well, we can ask Renee Haas that. I think that by the end, these guys are going to make it so that they pay you to take that. I mean, there's a little absurdity going on here. Why is NVIDIA not at 20 or 30? Because it's not true.
Well, I think there's two different things here. Right. One is the potential commoditization of the AI providers, the OpenAIs, the Geminis, although it's obviously associated with the Anthropics. You want to go through them, and whether they will be sort of offering all of them a product that is very much similar. And so, what is going to end up differentiating them?
Right.
By the way,
has one.
OpenAI trying to raise another $40 billion at a billion plus dollar valuation.
Well, we have to hear what Amazon says, because Amazon could lay to waste everybody.
And then there's the other side of it, which is yes, but you're going to need inference. Inferencing is everything, and that's still going to require Blackwell chips from NVIDIA, the only real player, even though others are trying to design some of their chips.
Now, that's what we're going to hear from Renee Haas.
And any efficiencies will just be baked in and ultimately get us to wherever we're going a bit faster.
Well, what's hurt this period, it is the NVIDIA quiet period. And what if Jensen were to come out and say, you know what, I hope this stuff goes to zero, because then you'll be able to use the part of Blackwell that is so great, which I think is true. In other words, there was another recommendation today of NVIDIA. They're obviously trying to get it so that it stabilizes. But I think that NVIDIA, if we hear tonight that Amazon says, you know what, we got to spend and our Trainium isn't going to do it, we remain great partners in NVIDIA. If we hear remain great partners in NVIDIA, David, NVIDIA goes to 245?
Really?
Yeah.
As we look ahead to NVIDIA, guys, I spoke to an investor who actually doesn't think that dollar strength will hurt its international sales anytime soon, because tech companies outside of the U.S., he says they're going to buy as many chips as they can before tougher export controls go into place. The bigger concern, he warns, is later in the year when we might see more CapEx digestion. Back to you.
I mean, we'll be interested to see what NVIDIA says on their call, because if they give any hint of, hey, demand has slowed or all this CapEx is not coming our way, even though the stock's trading in the high 20s, you could see a pullback. However, I still think NVIDIA is one of our largest holdings. We've cut it back over time, but I do think the secular tailwind there, and you could have a couple of quarters, and we know NVIDIA can be down double digits or it'll be up. So you want to also pick high-quality companies, and I think, for us, NVIDIA is one of those.
And with all due respect to Galileo, the center of the stock market universe remains NVIDIA. They're going to report their earnings on February 26. By then, I think this DeepSeek scare will have completely faded into a rearview mirror. In fact, more and more research is coming out that says that $6 million price tag may be just a little funky. Maybe it was more like $1.6 billion instead of a handful of old NVIDIA chips. Maybe it was 50,000 NVIDIA chips. So maybe the DeepSeek scare goes away. All right, I want to bring in my first guest, and let's start with NVIDIA. Lance Roberts. Hey, Lance, I just want to get your thoughts on this whole DeepSeek scare. It seems to be fading away a little bit. In fact, some are saying it sparked a bidding war for all the other NVIDIA chips.
Well, it did. And we actually wrote an article right after that came out and said, look, there's so many things we don't know. And now all this stuff's starting to come to light. Maybe there was 15,000 NVIDIA chips used. There's a whole lot of questions around that. But then also one of the things we've got to be aware of is this is a total Chinese-owned AI intelligence company. Remember, we're already in the middle of a ban for TikTok. So it's very likely, in fact, the bill is just being introduced now to potentially ban DeepSeek from use in the U.S. So this just opens up the ability for U.S. to continue to dominate in the space. But competition breeds more competition, which is great, because that's just more demand that's going to be needed. And again, right now, NVIDIA is the leader of its chips. It's so much money per second. AI is there, but it's going to be NVIDIA for now on.
All right, so here's the thing. Coming into the week, I want to show the audience something, right? Coming into the week, NVIDIA was trading at $120 a share. The lowest target on Wall Street is $130 a share. In fact, a couple of firms see it at $220. So you've got a stock with an average target of $173. Even right now, it's at $128. I know you talked about buying the dip. Are you in there buying this yet?
Well, we've been long NVIDIA for a long time, and it's one of our favorite holdings in our portfolio. But yes, what I want to see is a little bit more recovery. It had a really sharp sell-off, following this earnings announcement, DeepSeek, and all this that was going on. That volatility is now clearing itself out. I think over the next few days, we'll probably have a very good entry point to add to that position. But yes, I am going to be buying more of that position. It's just a question of timing.
Would you buy before or after the earnings report?
We're going to be buying before the earnings report. I am betting that earnings report is going to be a lot better than estimates are expecting right now. A lot of those estimates have come down a lot, which have now really kind of set NVIDIA up the ability to beat those estimates and deliver a better outlook than what's expected.
I mean, NVIDIA stock has been hit hard out of late as well. In fact, NVIDIA is down 14% in just the past month. A lot of that follows DeepSeek's large language model announcement. Remember that? But despite the recent decline, your next guest thinks this could actually be a buying opportunity to get back into NVIDIA. Joining us now to talk about it all is Joe Moore. He is semiconductor analyst at Morgan Stanley. Joseph, we've now had, a week, 10 days to actually absorb and try to learn about DeepSeek after it kind of came out of the blue and hit us, a lot of us, very hard and very quickly. What have we learned, and what makes you a little more optimistic about NVIDIA?
Yeah, well, look, I think it's a very impressive model that was created out of China. But the space here is one that has a lot of innovation over the course of any given year, any given month. And I think, we see this as more of an evolutionary gain, where DeepSeek was able to get a little bit more out of a small investment than we've seen in the past. But our checks would say that investment in the space remains very robust. We're not seeing people rethink the larger kind of cluster, what we call large cluster training models that people have been talking about. There's sort of very clear evidence that persists. So we still quite like the stock. And I think, Jensen has talked about providing a 1,000,000x performance in kind of AI capability in the last decade and doing it again in the next decade. You're going to get deflation along the way. You're going to get indications like this where, people are doing things cheaper and better. And we think that's part of the narrative here.
Yeah, you look at that and you think, okay, well, DeepSeek, and listen, I want to be clear to our viewers and listeners. Some people think DeepSeek is a complete BS. I'm going to use my initials in a nice way, Joseph, and that maybe they're actually using NVIDIA chips and it's a chat GPT, whatever. Let's put aside sort of all the, quote, conspiracy theories over here and just look at NVIDIA's valuation. It is still an expensive stock. How would you defend that valuation number?
Yeah, well, it's actually not that expensive of a stock on earnings. I mean, they're very profitable. So if you think about price to sales, it's quite expensive. But we see the stock trading at a low 20s multiple on next year. So the question is, are those earnings numbers right? Are we going to stay on the trajectory that we're on? I think that we are. I think, in fact, we'll accelerate in the back half of the year. And you've actually seen some of the other AI alternatives, companies that provide custom solutions into AI, such as Broadcom and Marvell, now trading at a premium to where NVIDIA's trading. So it's my view that as we get fully into this Blackwell cycle, we'll get that earnings momentum back quite a bit stronger in the back half of the year. And I don't think it will prove to be that expensive. But, you guys talked about the perils of semiconductors early on. I'm definitely aware of that. And when you have a gold rush like this, things can slow down. The thing is, they're just not right now. We're seeing, despite all of the anxieties around DeepSeek and the next generation models, we continue to see quite a bit of growth through at least the end of this year.
And I thought perhaps one of the more notable developments this week, Joseph, was actually what happened with AMD. Because if you wanted to be really bearish on NVIDIA, you could say, well, you could use AMD chips. And I know people say maybe some of the mega caps use their own chips and things like that. But what do you think AMD's results showed us?
Yeah, well, look, AMD's done very well. Year one, they did over $5 billion in kind of a startup product, a very impressive number. But NVIDIA is going to have around 85% share when 2024, kind of all the numbers are closed out. And I think that number actually can rise slightly in 2025. It's competing with NVIDIA is not easy. If it were, a lot of other people would be doing it. And so we're enthused for AMD, for Broadcom, for Marvell. We see a lot of opportunity in this AI space. We like all of the stocks. But NVIDIA is our top pick because they are in a very strong position right now. And going into a product cycle where they're delivering on a capability of scaling out at a rack scale level and a data center level in a way that AMD is kind of still working to be able to do. So enthused for AMD's long-term opportunities, but I think NVIDIA will have more momentum this year.
But I mean, are you reassessing one of your favorite stocks, NVIDIA, at all? I mean, what if we can call you know what on DeepSeek, the cost, right, of what they allegedly did, what they are purported to have done? It's almost irrelevant. What if that's just a moment that suggests it's going to become demonstrably cheaper to build these models? And that's going to have a transformative impact on the kinds of companies that have benefited to this point. They're just not going to make as much money as they once thought they could.
Right. So I think there's a couple of things that even OpenAI, if they were to make their O3 model, I don't know how much their O3 model cost or their O1 model, it's not 2 orders of magnitude more expensive to make than the DeepSeek model. It may have been, a few multiples higher, not orders of magnitude higher. That's the first thing. Secondly, the total cost of the training of DeepSeek and all of that infrastructure, and also the fact that they were kind of trained on other models, other LLMs.
Right, it's open source.
Right, so because it was open sourced, means that you still need that base infrastructure. Now, I would remind you that CapEx numbers actually didn't come down at all. Google, Meta, maybe not Meta, but Google, OpenAI, Anthropic, they knew of all of these techniques and are using those techniques themselves.
Yeah.
All right, I hope you're all doing great today. The S&P finished the day about 0.3% higher, and NVIDIA finished the day about 3.1% higher. Today, after market close, Amazon reported earnings and shared some information about their CapEx guidance. We learned that Amazon spent $26.3 billion on CapEx in Q4 of 2024, which was much more than expected. And they said that number is in line with their CapEx spending plans for 2025. That would mean that we're looking at 2025 CapEx guidance of roughly $100 billion from Amazon. That is very good news for NVIDIA. We have once again made it through an earnings season with all of the hyperscalers reaffirming their commitments to spend billions more on CapEx in 2025 than what was expected. And that is very good news for NVIDIA, who will be a major beneficiary of that CapEx. One other thing I want to mention from the Amazon earnings call is that CEO Andy Jassy was asked about DeepSeek and the implications of DeepSeek on technology spend. I'm paraphrasing, but Jassy essentially said that he does not think reductions in inference costs will result in less tech spending, as many have incorrectly assumed following the news about DeepSeek. Rather, Jassy thinks that as the cost of inferencing comes down, companies will actually spend more on technology, as lower inferencing costs will motivate them to build and innovate even more than they otherwise would. That is good news for NVIDIA. Some other news we got today is that President Trump and Japan's Prime Minister Ishiba will discuss joint AI chip development at a summit this Friday. I'm sure whatever is said at the summit will have an impact on NVIDIA and the semiconductor industry as a whole this Friday. So be on the lookout for any news from that summit. As I've been saying repeatedly recently, be prepared in case we get any news about the specific details of the chip tariffs that are expected to happen. President Trump said last Friday, after meeting with Jensen Huang, that there would be tariffs on chips. Now the question is how much the tariffs will be, and will there be any exceptions? If we get news about chip tariffs or tariffs on Taiwan, then that will likely put some short-term pressure on NVIDIA's stock. So be prepared for that in the days ahead, just in case. Looking ahead, I'm optimistic as Blackwell is ramping in volume, and we have NVIDIA earnings scheduled for February 26th. And then later on, we have NVIDIA's GTC March 17th through the 21st. This is an important event for NVIDIA, and it's where we are likely to get news about NVIDIA's products in the data center, which is where NVIDIA makes the majority of their revenue. We may learn more details about Rubin, and we may even learn about the next generation after Rubin. Anything could happen in the short term, but from a long-term perspective, I think the thesis surrounding NVIDIA and the build-out of AI infrastructure remains intact. With all of that being said, I hope you all have a great rest of the day, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts about NVIDIA in the comments below. Please leave a like on this video so more people will see it. And while you're down there, please consider subscribing. It's free, and you can always change your mind. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.